Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. It's so great to have everyone on. My name is Dudney Silla, and I am a program director here at Mentor. Welcome to our social connection in a time of COVID-19 webinar series hosted by Mentor. Today, we will be discussing organizational leadership and change and navigating changes in management, organizational roles, finances, operations, during this pandemic. We hope on this call that we will have a great balance of sharing resources while also creating a communal environment for sharing and connecting with one another. And we have a great group of panelists who will be supporting us in today's conversation. If we go to the next slide. With us today, here's a sampling, a snapshot of the many organizations joining us today who registered. We'd like to welcome all of you. Our partners from diverse mentoring programs, schools, and youth development organizations from all across the country. Many of you also join Mentor for our quarterly national organization calls, which we hold to provide updates on ways to engage and collaborate as part of the mentoring movement. This discussion series is an extension of those calls, and we wanted to include as many programs as possible in this discussion so that we can create a community and work together to respond to this pandemic. So please feel free to use the chat box to introduce your name, where you are in the country, as well as your organization. In terms of today's agenda, after this welcome, and I'll go over some housekeeping items as well. I'll toss it over to David to do introductions. Then we have a great panel conversation and Q&A for you, and then we will close with some next steps and resources for you all to consider after this webinar. In terms of housekeeping, just a few reminders for how to participate today. Everyone will be muted, throughout the webinar just to protect sound quality. However, we still want you to participate. This call is for you to share resources, ideas, concerns. So we want to encourage you to use the question box to input all of those comments throughout the webinar as you're hearing from everybody share. This call is also being recorded, so for those who registered, we'll be able to have an access to the slides and the recording afterwards. And throughout this webinar, if there's anything that stands out to you or you want to share, feel free to tweet at us as well at Mentor National using the hashtag MentorIRL. And so the question box is there for you throughout today to share your ideas, share your questions, share your thoughts, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. And so with that, I'd like to toss it over to David, who will kick us off. And we are excited about this conversation today. Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much, Dudney. And thanks to all of you. Thanks to Minnie Chen on our team as well, who's sort of the wizard behind the curtain, and Eleanor as well, who's taking notes to make sure that we surface all the great ideas and insights from today. Today really came up like so many things in these days. It came up somewhat organically and responsively. I'd love to think like this was some kind of vision we had about the pandemic and exactly how many series we would do in the pandemic. Really what happened was that we were immediately focused on the nuts and bolts of mentoring, like standing up the virtual mentoring portal and thinking about what were texting tips and drawing on our friends at I Could Be and Cricket, who have a lot of experience in virtual mentoring. But what was also happening at the same time was that leaders in the space, from programs that manage 20 matches that are 8 years old and leaders that manage 25 sites and have thousands of mentors and are mentoring 16-year-olds, were coming forward with both the challenges and solutions that were coming up in this time as leaders, as organizations, making short-term decisions and balancing them with long-term strategic discipline, uncertain about the economy and the economics of all of our organizations. And they were coming forward with something to share. And I tell you, this is one of the greatest burdens and privileges of Mentor. We obviously get to do it at the National Mentoring Summit in person, but throughout the year, it is the amount of amazing things we hear about that I just wish at all moments like I had some sort of, echoing device that every time I'm hearing about incredible things from incredible leaders, everyone in the field was hearing them. But I feel, and Mentor feels, a deep sense of responsibility that anything we're hearing, you guys are hearing as well. The field is hearing as well. If you're willing to put in the time to either voice the challenges and solutions, or you're willing to listen to your peers, we want to honor that time because you've got a million other things to be doing. And so, today was a lot about just trying to elevate some of those voices. You will hear the organizations that the folks that are going to speak are running some of the most different mentoring programs in the world from each other in different parts of the country, different scale, different history. Some have 3 years working in mentoring, some have 25 or longer. But they are dynamically facing this moment, as are all of you on this call. And there's over, I think, 150 of you on the call, or 120 of you, or whatever. And we hope, and this is something I'm always trying to say on these calls, one of my least favorite things is the term Q&A, because it makes it sound as if there's some power dynamic. And no offense to the people on the panel, but I don't have a whole lot of answers. I got more questions than answers. So my hope is that you will introduce yourselves in the chat, introduce your insights, and let us lift them up on this call. And afterwards, if you have questions, please ask them. But the dynamic here is not that we have answers and you have questions. The dynamic here is that we're only as good as the wisdom of all of us. I would say a couple other things, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sadiq Ali, who runs our affiliate Maryland Mentor in Maryland and has been holding together the field and the movement there, just to give you a sense of what it's like at the state level. Is that context is key, I have found in these conversations. And I hope we will contextualize our comments, as well as you will give us grace around someone may be talking about a problem they've faced or faced down with a $10 million budget. And someone else has a $50,000 budget and has been around for 1 year and is like, that's not really that helpful to me. We get that. Some lessons are transferable, some are grounded in context. So the inequities that have been laid bare, for those who weren't already looking at them, is a huge part of the context of the moment we're living in. And it is the dividing line between for whom this is an inconvenience and for whom this is a tragic instability. And so we're all dealing with these range of things. I will say on behalf of the panel that I don't think anyone here on this panel would say, do as I do exactly. They are just sharing the learnings in this moment from their experience, and want to lift those up. And I will tell you, from having talked to each of them, they have helped me through plenty of moments of trying to figure out where we go next. And I'm so appreciative to them for their inspiration and their experience and their sort of fierce determination in this moment and sharing of themselves today. So I'm gonna turn it over to Sadiq. Sadiq Ali is a guy who often, when I hear him speak, I just want to say, how about just taking the job of CEO of Mentor? I might sleep well tonight because you'd run it better than I would. But he is running our Maryland affiliate. They have been pulling together the field a bunch there because, one thing I have learned is we're leaning on technology heavy, but it has a lot to do with the relationships we had before we had to lean on it heavy. And Sadiq was holding the field together there before, and he's doing it now. So Sadiq, I thought if you just want to sort of pick anything out from your vantage point of over these months, trying to listen to the organizations in Maryland and, provide some strength for them and some platforms for them, whatever you want to share, and then we'll go down the line with the panelists. So Sadiq, take it away, man.
No, that's awesome. I really appreciate it. Can everybody hear me okay? First off, just good afternoon. And again, I just want to echo everything that David has said thus far, and just first and foremost, just offer thank you. I think much has been sort of bandied about lately around this definition of essential, right? Who is essential and who is, non-essential, right? You guys can see my air quotes. The work that each of us do right now, I don't care what level of the organization you're in, the work that we do, if it revolves around supporting young people, is unequivocally essential. And for that, I just want to start off and just thank everybody on this line for everything that you're doing. I don't care if you're in administration or, again, if you're frontline staff, I appreciate it, because at no time in history are relationships more important than they are right now as it pertains to supporting young people. So just a couple of things I would just add in from the state level, and really just add a finer point to some of what David has already opened up with. And it really, for me, just revolves around 3 C's, right? Of what we've sort of noted and observed thus far from the field. And those 3 C's are creativity. I have some notes here for y'all, right? But creativity, community, and collaboration. And ultimately, they all lead to the cause that we're all so passionate about, and that is youth development. And in our field, we happen to call it mentoring. But I would just say, in terms of creativity, we've just seen so much creativity from programs in Maryland, and I think David already gave some really, really cool examples. But we've heard everything from virtual proms. I know Obama is supposed to be speaking and sort of addressing the nation's graduates here pretty soon, but we've seen birthday card pull-ups, virtual pizza parties where mentors, right, obviously engaging in proper social distancing and guidelines, delivering pizzas to their mentees, and then hopping on Instagram while everybody eats the pizza at the same time, just to sort of build that connection. And again, a million other ideas, but that creativity has been really, really just exciting for me to see. And again, it just encourages all of us together to just think outside the box. I would say that leads directly into community, just in terms of, community was there before this. And what we hope is that even in the face of what David just described, this tragic instability for many of the folks that we serve, we'll still come out of this stronger by way of community. And I think in terms of fundraising, or, just general support, or even mentor recruitment, many programs in Maryland, they're strongly engaged right now in continuing volunteer and mentor recruitment. We've seen food drives and people doing virtual collections for that. So then this idea of community is buoying, I think, many of the programs that we are and that we're in relationship with. And I would say lastly, around the collaboration piece, is that, normally, in this business, and I think we can all agree to a certain extent, programs can tend to be sometimes territorial, right? Like, we want credit for the great idea. But I would say I've just seen really unabashed collaboration and sharing of resources and ideas, and again, just that offer of collaboration without, again, really care about who gets the credit, but really, again, we're all looking for that joint impact together. So creativity, community, and collaboration have shown through very, very brightly for me. And again, I'm just proud to be part of the affiliate network, and really, it's our job to sort of help moderate all of this and provide platforms. So we've been doing bi-weekly town halls just for folks to gather together and be able to share some of the things that I just highlighted. But it's my honor and pleasure to be a part of this field with all of you fine leaders. And I just look forward to returning to hopefully the old new normal, or like the old normal, David, and for us to get back to our business sooner than later. So I appreciate you all.
Thanks so much, Sadiq. I want to do a check-in and see if our first panelist, Harry Johnson, is on but not on video. Harry, are you with us? We may skip Harry. We had Harry, but it's been hard because there's so many people on to get on the video. But we can come back. We can sort of circle back to Harry, if that makes sense. Why don't we do that? Harry, I'll give you one more chance, and then we'll just come back. Okay, so we're going to start with Terry Sorensen from Friends of the Children, showing some of that flexibility that we need in these days. Let me just give you a quick sense, guys, who are on the phone, of what we're going to do for about the next, I'd say 20 minutes, I'm guessing, but we'll see. We've asked each of the panelists to basically create a slide, which I think is going to be a great lasting legacy, and we'll add with many of your insights, and we'll make all this public as well as the recording, about some of their main takeaways from this moment so far, because the moment is not over, and the moment, as Sadiq said, maybe our new adjustment. But we've asked them to do that. They've been amazing in doing that. And then obviously, like, as we go down the line, a lot of them have a lot of similar things they're going through in this moment. Another thing about this moment I find so interesting is that we are all going through something very similar, but experiencing it very differently based on where we sit, who we are, what we run, how we're dealing with jobs or not having them, or what our situation is. And so they're going to do that, and they're going to try to be, pretty soundbitey, couple minutes, 3 minutes, just to leave room for each other to go down the line, and then we'll circle back to them as questions come up and insights come up, which Dudney will lift up out of the chat after sort of each of the 5 of them go. Let me tell you just quickly about Terry Sorensen, who is one of the most driven and creative leaders I know. She started the original kind of flagship of Friends of the Children, which is a 12-year intensive wraparound mentoring model using paid professionals who are Friends for Achievers. And from that first site in Portland, now I'm going to mess it up, Terry, and you'll clean it up. But there are a lot of sites now and growing. I want to say 12, but I probably messed that up. So Terry will help me. But it feels like she's always got a new site popping up. And they are just doing amazing work in their mentoring model. So I'm going to turn it over to Terry to kick us off. And then after she's done, I'll move us to the next panelist and we'll keep moving along. Go ahead, Terry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. You got it mostly right. We're now in 22 cities, actually. It's been really interesting. I've been with the organization 17 years, so that I had the opportunity to lead our founding chapter in 2008, 2009 during the economic crisis. And while this is different and much worse, I found that some of the lessons learned from leading during that time are applicable today, both in service to kids as well as in how you keep your organization going and keep everybody motivated and moving forward to get the outcomes that we all want for our youth. First and foremost, I would say we focused on what we're doing now. So over the last few years, we've been expanding pretty rapidly across the country. And once COVID-19 happened, we said, it's time to pivot from expansion and really focus on excellence in what we're doing now. So serving our kids and their families, being true to our employees and our chapters and affiliates across the country. So that's been a main focus over the past 2 months. The second is really around recognizing the digital divide. I think all of us probably knew there was a digital divide, but never was it more imperative to figure out how to connect to our youth that we see for 3 to 4 hours every week. And in some cases, we were finding, while I think every family across the country, and we have thousands of families, had at least one phone. Often there were 7 people in a household trying to use that one phone to connect and have 5 kids do distance learning with schools. And often their caregiver, over 40% of our kids are in foster care at any one time. Often their caregiver or their grandmother wasn't great at technology. And so friends were having to try to figure out how to really help, be a technology advisor as well as continue to develop these strong relationships. Finally, I would say we were focused on how do we sustain and support our programs going forward. And a lot of our chapters had events that were happening this fall or this spring. And we really worked with our teams to find out what would work best in their community. And for example, in San Francisco, where their event was canceled, they did an online campaign that actually has raised almost double what they did at their last event. And that's our LA chapter has focused on the same kind of online fundraising as well as in Boston. A couple of our sites in the next 2 weeks have virtual fundraisers happening, and we're really excited about that. One of them typically raises between $2 and $2.5 million. So this is going to be a real test in the fundraising side as well. And then knowing that there would potentially be gaps in our ability to keep our employees on board and maintain that continuity for kids, we really took a proactive approach in filing for PPL loans across the country. With all of our sites combined, we applied for $3.5 million and have received nearly all of that money. I think there's maybe 100,000 that hasn't come in. And so we know that's going to be key for our employees to feel confident that, you know, that those loans will be forgiven and become grants if we can keep everyone on staff, and that provides a sense of security for all of our youth, our families, and their friends, if you will. One more thing, we call ourselves a no matter what organization, and I think we are saying to ourselves, like, never has that been more important. You know, doing whatever it takes for our children and families. So we're dropping off books, food, workbooks at their home. We're, you know, meeting with funders to get devices and distance learning apps, and Mentor's been so helpful in that area. We're developing protocols for how we reopen. And, you know, it's an exciting time, but I'm a big believer that leaders of organizations, your true colors come out when you're in a crisis, not when things are going well. So we're in it for the long haul, no matter what.
Thank you so much, Terry. That's an awesome way to start, and so appreciate the many examples that you lifted up. And we'll be circling back to you. I'm sure a lot of people will probably want a seminar from you on the Paycheck Protection Program after this is all over. That's a pretty good hit rate. A lot of small businesses, I think, would like help as well. I'm going to turn to Ellen Mahoney, who is not on the screen, but we have her on audio. I just want to quickly tell you, I mean, Sea Change Mentoring is unbelievable around the mentoring they do in international schools around the world and with educators. Ellen, she holds two things in mind for me in this moment, especially. Ellen was talking about COVID because she was familiar with Wuhan. They may even have a school that they work with there before I knew what it was, and was talking to me and tweeting out about what it's like to try to do mentoring when folks are in physical isolation, I think before any of us were even thinking about it. And then she also just has done incredible work and really stressing this time about our mindfulness around those of us who are trying to take care of other people, and how we kind of balance this moment for us as well in terms of what we need to be doing, what we could be doing, and all those things. And so she's been just kind of a paragon of mental health and balance for me, and thinking about this moment, but also has incredible sort of international mentoring context and the like. Ellen, are you with us? You good?
I am. That was a very, very sweet introduction.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much. So, I mean, first of all, to echo the way Sadiq opened everything up, I also just want to say thank you to all of you. I know that it is really hard right now. It's really hard and it's exhausting. And you probably have moments when you are excited and focused and you're problem solving and you're getting things done, and a lot of other moments where you are exhausted, depleted, and, you know, desperate for some inspiration. And I just want to say that I see you, and I totally understand, and I'm so grateful that you get up every day to do your job. It's so important, and so thank you. Yeah, so like David was saying, I do a lot of work in China and in Asia, and so I started getting sort of frantic emails from some schools in Beijing, not in Wuhan, but in Beijing, when most of the teachers that I work with were outside of China for the Chinese New Year, when 3 billion families go on vacation all at the same time. And even people that are living in cities who might not have a lot of resources do travel for Chinese New Year. They go back to their original country towns. So it's a crazy time. And so I was getting calls from teachers and mentors who were saying that they couldn't get back into China. They didn't know what was going on. And a lot of those mentors are still in other countries, staying on friends' couches with their families because they can't get back to China, back to their home. So I just wanted to share that with you. And that's how it all started. And then I've just sort of watched this wave get closer and closer to us, and hit a bunch of my other schools that I work with in Italy, for example, and then back here. I think, you know, as David was saying, the biggest thing that for me just keeps coming up is how important it is for us to take care of our people. And I know when you think like our people, what does that mean? You know, is it our neighborhood? Is it the community we serve? I think actually it starts first with ourselves and then with our employees or our volunteers. We have to find time, and I know it's really hard for a lot of us, but we have to find time to, even if all you have is like a minute for 3 breaths in the morning, you have to do that, because we have to sustain this work. We don't know how long this is going to last. It'll probably come in waves. And so we have to sustain ourselves. And then we have to look around us and help sustain our fellow colleagues, our employees, our volunteers, the membership here in the National Mentoring Partnership. I've just seen this. I've seen this wave of exhaustion and then filling back up, and then exhaustion and then filling back up. And one of my concerns is I want to hold on to those people. I don't want those people to leave the work that they're doing, because they're great. And so we have to figure out, what do we do? I've seen organizations have their employees take Friday off. They call them mental health Fridays, and you do not have to answer your emails unless it's an emergency. And you have the day to yourself to catch up on work if you want to, or catch up on sleep if you want to. So I've seen things like that I think are really important. I've seen as organizations are struggling to figure out how do we financially sustain ourselves, I've definitely seen some organizations try and pivot. And Terry, I loved what you said about the, pivoting away from expansion and towards excellence. I think for a lot of us, our first instinct is to hustle, and just almost amp up the work that we are already doing. And really, I feel like it's a time to pull back a little bit and focus on sort of the main meat of our work, and do that work really well. So I'm really glad you said that. So I've seen organizations pivot, and sometimes they're so scared of whether or not they're going to financially stay afloat that they pivot all over the place, and they start to forget who they are. They engage in that mission creep. They start offering whatever they can think of instead of taking a breath, taking a pause, and then focusing their efforts onto what they're really about. So if anyone is struggling with that, I hope that you kind of do more, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think both Terry and Sadiq and David talk about this like collaboration and working across our organizations. And I've seen the most amazing, it's just been really amazing to see mentors in China teach mentors in Japan, those mentors in Japan teach mentors in Italy, the mentors in Italy teach the mentors in the United States, saying, we've been through this, you're going to get through this. Here's what I wish I knew. So I've been seeing that even just country to country, and I know I'm seeing that here in the United States with all the different amazing organizations sharing resources, sharing ideas, sharing inspiration. And it's a real reminder of this beautiful community that when I go overseas and I work with these communities overseas, I'm always telling them about the youth mentoring movement in the United States and how incredible it is. And so I really think that, our light is shining here. Yeah, I think there's the last two things that sort of come up for me are more questions. I don't have a full, beautiful answer for any of you or for myself yet, but to me, I've been just trying to focus on taking this as an opportunity to do a better job, a better job in doing my part in building the world I want to live in. And, to me, it won't shock anyone. It's really about relationships, and it's about love, and being kind and useful. So to me, I'm just trying to think about, all right, am I doing that? How can I take advantage of this opportunity to do more of that and to really focus on that? And then the other really big question I have is, I think we all know that this is shining a light on what we already knew, that there are children who are being abused at home and we're not doing enough to protect them, for example. We know that there are young people that do not have some pretty basic resources these days, including internet or enough technology to learn well, et cetera, et cetera. We've got, especially women are carrying so much of the load right now with, working and helping to teach their kids and feeding everybody and everything. And we're seeing there's just a lot on women right now. So we're seeing all of that. Is that shocking to most of us? No, this is why we're in the work that we're doing. And it certainly reminds us of the importance of community and relationships. As we are thinking about the future, my question is, I think that a lot of us see this as, now we're finally able to show everyone that there is this inequity and how important relationships are. And so right now we might be feeling that. I just want to make sure that we can figure out the best ways to keep that feeling going. When everyone starts to get healthy, whenever that might be, hopefully sooner than later, when we go back to living the new normal, how do we sustain some of that change? And how do we remind people that their eyes were, that other folks' eyes were opened to inequity and to the possibility that relationships hold, and how do we sustain that change? And I know a lot of it is about community organization and organizing, political organizing and whatnot, but that's the question that I keep kind of wrestling with.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ellen. I mean, and that is the biggest question, right? Is what are we building? Who are we in this moment, and who will we be on the other side of it? And will we be something better than how we came into it? Those are probably some of the biggest questions. But thank you so much, and I love "Do You More" as a tagline for all of us to figure out. Harry, you are on, man. You persevered through web issues and technical issues. So I'm going to go back to you to talk a little bit about, and Harry, I should say, is one of the co-founders of Brothers at Bard, and then now expanding to other locations. Dariel Vasquez is his co-founder. Many of you may have heard Dariel at the National Mentoring Summit. These guys, in terms of, I think near peer leaders and young men who sort of talk about not doing unto us, but doing alongside us and leading alongside us, speak it, live it as powerfully as anyone on earth. And so, Harry, tell us about what's going on in this moment for you guys at Brothers.
Well, I'll say first off, I think one of the loneliest moments you could have is when you lose connection on a call with 150 people and you try to work your way back in somehow. So I'll say we
were just trying to simulate disconnection and isolation since we all are fighting against that.
100%. I say, well, first off, it's an honor to be on the call, and I thank you for thinking of us, and Mentor for thinking of us. And I just wanted to give a little bit, where we're at. We're in a really unique position right now, trying to grow our program to new spaces. As you just heard, it's for most people, it's not the time to do that. But I think that our belief in the fact that those closest to the problem are also closer to the solution is what has really carried us through this treacherous time. As we started to prepare to expand our program to new colleges and communities, Dariel and I, we knew that we had to bring on more staff, and we stayed committed to changing the narrative that that those closest to the problem don't get the resources. And we created 2 different fellowships, and we hired a former mentee and a former mentor, and really invested in the talent of those that we were serving, with the hope that they'll one day be able to lead this work. We knew that if we invested into them, we would have to invest time and money and love into helping them develop professionally and support them emotionally as well. And when COVID came, we really saw the fruits of our labor over the past 7 months. And it revealed the deep, authentic knowledge that they have, not only having the ability to identify the problems that might arise during a time like this, but also keen insights into how we can best support our boys during this time. So, it's revealed the level of ownership that they have over the program, our coordinators, our mentors, and really looking to see this thing be successful and thrive. It's allowed us to tap into their flexibility, their ability to be tech savvy, and it showed us, that their deep investment into our program and the success of the organization is just it's invaluable. Darielle and I were calling our mentors who had to pack their stuff up and leave the college needed, if they had the support that they would need as they made that transition back into their home conditions, or those that had to stay on campus. And as we were making those calls, they were calling us saying things along the lines of, hey, if Brothers Ad is doing anything during this time, please let me know, keep me involved. My mentee is decision day is coming up, and I've helped my mentee apply to 8 different schools. Like, can you just keep us connected during this time? And as I'm sure everybody on this call knows, mentor retention is everything, and having that deep commitment to the work is invaluable. So since April, we've been able to have about 50 hours of mentoring. We launched a financial literacy leg to our program, and we also started a book club, Brothers Well Read, at the same time. And Darielle and I were sitting back and thinking about how we were able to do this during this time, and we really attributed our success to what we're calling struggle literacy. I was raised by a single mom who lost her home during the financial crisis, and at the age of 15, I watched her keep food on the table, find a way to keep a roof over our heads, find me rides to basketball practice, and keep a smile on her face the whole time. And I would just think, how is she doing this? And the answer was simple. It's she was struggle literate. She was able to see a way where most people saw no way. And when we asked our mentors, where do we go now? They said, first, our mentees need an escape. They need a place to have fun, then a place with excitement, not just social emotional support. So we created, game rooms on Xbox and PlayStation. We held virtual debates. They also said that our mentees are always watching us. So we need to make sure that all of our social media and communications as an organization are positive. So we leaned into the Youth Voice Month, focusing on highlighting our boys, their words, and also their power. They also said that we can set up Zoom and we're tech savvy, but we need to get really good at this. We need to prepare to take our space methodology into this new space. And we reached out to another Bard alum, a virtual facilitation guru, and are working together now to create our space methodology and take it virtually. So I think on the slide there are a few resources on there. The first resource is a talent justice toolkit from an organization called Fund the People, and it's a toolkit really that gives you really practical ways and how to invest in the people that we serve, and also invest in those that are in our workforce to continue to just breed a sense of equity in the nonprofit space and environment. And then the second down there is an organization called Nonium, and they have this ridiculous, it's called Radically Remote Virtual Facilitation Toolkit. And the toolkit has a number, I say ridiculous because it's a ridiculous number of resources and how to take discussion-based programming virtually. And we'll be working really closely with him to move forward. So I definitely say take a look at that as well. But like I said, to wrap up, it's really our investment in those closest to the problems, and it's really shown during this time that they're really the closest to the solution. So yeah.
Harry, thank you so much, man. And thank you for persevering through disconnection, which is what we would be teaching, right? And listening. I also think, Harry, so much of what you said is something that I've said to our team a lot, which is, this moment magnifies who you are. It doesn't change who you are. It magnifies who you are. So if you had strong values and culture coming into this in your organization, or guiding principles for your organization, you're just leaning on them heavier than ever. but it is very hard to construct them in the crisis. In the same way, I think it is hard to find new alliances through a crisis, although they do sometimes creatively come up, but you can draw on the well of folks already around you. You also use the term struggle literate. And Liz Murray is about as struggle literate as any human I've ever known, not only in the fact that literally she has told her story, her own personal story in amazing detail in a book, but also in that, and along with her co-founder, Jeff Moody, I think it is almost the ultimate compliment to the field of mentoring that Liz looked back on her own journey, thought about her own mentor, Arthur, and created the Arthur Project, which is around, using trained MSWs to mentor middle school kids based in the Bronx, and has built just an unbelievably innovative model and built an organization alongside others in a very short period of time. And so I will turn it over to Liz. I know this is getting harder, panelists, as we go down the line. Denise, I definitely owe you a beer at some point. But Liz, keep going, and then we'll turn to the crowd after Denise.
Sure. I'll do my very best, David. Thank you so much for having me and for thinking of the Arthur Project during this time. I can't tell you how great it is to see all your faces and to know right now we have many people on the call. You're all a breath of fresh air during this insane time. And also from the perspective of someone, so I come to this work as someone who had a mentor transform my life. Arthur's the namesake of our program at the Arthur Project, and I know the difference from experience. So when I see all your faces, I love you for what you do, and I want to say I know it's not easy right now, and hang in there, and I appreciate you. So and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So David, I'm going to pick up on a thread from the beginning of what you said when you kicked us off today. It's not a Q&A session like the knowledge sits in one place, but this is a back and forth. So I've got my notes. I've been learning from all of you. And what I can say is at the Arthur Project, in order for me to explain just a little bit of how we've pivoted during this time, I would just clarify that we have a bit of a different model when it comes to mentoring. So as David mentioned, we engage MSW students who are clinicians in training, and we work with them so that their field placement in their MSW program is actually with us. And so that means that we have an opportunity that is pretty unique in that we're not volunteer based, and we have folks who are training to be therapists. So in a sense, function as therapeutic mentors, if you will, to middle school students. And we're a new program. We're wrapping up our third academic year when COVID hit, right? And we're just getting to know who we are, transitioning from a startup to a young organization, getting its footing. And what's been so wonderful prior to this, and I can't agree enough, I think many folks have said it here, is that this doesn't really, this tests who you are and reveals to you so much of what you already had in place. And I have to say that the intensity of the relationship, the mentor and mentee relationship that we are able to bring about at the Arthur Project has turned out to be the core blessing here. Our kids get 8 to 10 hours per week, every week throughout middle school, all of middle school, with a mentor in our program. The mentor changes each year, but altogether about 500 hours a year engaged in either one-on-one, but they don't like being around adults that much, right? So we put them in group activities and also group activities. And what does that mean during the time of coronavirus and COVID? When we had this interruption and everyone was sent home, we go from having these extremely intensive touch points to what do we do now, like everyone else. And I have to say that, we knew we would go online remotely. That was a given. We looked to continue our mentoring sessions because for us, our model, I think, Harry, you were saying that mentor retention is, we all know how critical that can be. Well, with us at the Arthur Project, usually it's kind of more locked in because they're MSW programs. Well, guess what happened? Every MSW student got released from their obligation. So what do we do? I want to bring about the word creativity. I want to focus on two words here that have been big learnings: creativity and responsiveness. And when I say responsiveness, thinking about keeping the mentor-mentee dyad intact during this time, the key thing there has been good listening. So we know that our MSW students were released from their obligation to be with us, but they also did show interest in continuing on. Currently, we have 130 kids that are being served directly, in our program, and then we have our mentors, 30 of them. So we have a lot of people to think about how can we keep them connected during this time. For our MSW students, I'm going to go back to something that Harry said. I couldn't love it more. Thank you for this. The people closest to the problem or closest to the solution. We set out to listen first with the intention of keeping people on digital meetings and continuing on our program. We listened to the needs, and then sure enough, someone on our staff had a creative idea how to reallocate some funding so that we could switch over to a model that paid them for therapeutic hours so that the mentors signed on. And then we tried to guess how many kids will have interest in continuing on virtually. And I don't know, we thought, well, are we being generous if out of 130 we say 70 stay with us? But over 100 have been consistent with the program and eager to connect with their mentors and meeting regularly. And I threw up on the slide this idea of a responsive approach for a very critical reason. Once we were able to listen closely and make sure that the mentors' needs were met, we pivoted over and said, okay, well, what will it take for the kids to feel that they can participate and that we're really serving them at this time and meeting their needs? So we sent out a family survey, and we felt that the first thing to do was to really listen. How has this crisis impacted you? And to have a systematic way to take in that information. So we took in information such as how many people are in the household, who, have people lost work altogether or less work due to COVID? What benefits are you receiving? What kind of technology they have in the home. And once we did a fair amount of listening, we were able to make sure that our kids had in place what they needed. And I think that the families, from our experience, the families were very appreciative in the sense that, I don't know if any of you listening today have children who are doing remote learning, but there's sort of the approach from an organization such as a school or any program to say, this is what it looks like, period. We have, as an organization, the people have all gotten together and decided this is what we'll be offering, is sort of how it goes. I mean, I'm a mom, I have 2 kids. I was not asked a single question by my child's school, and I love my child's school. But with us as a program, we didn't want to do that. We collaborated. So I want to stress collaboration, listening, and then creativity and kind of being willing to do whatever it takes. And by listening to our families, we were able to understand a range of their needs. And I do believe that it fostered a sense of trust, like a trust-based kind of influence there. And we're able to get them going. So we're continuing our services now. And I want to say that when it comes to having mentors who are social work students, therapists in training, many of them clinically focused, it's been a huge help, because now that we're set up, that we have a lot of folks who are able to join us and continue the mentoring, we're hearing from the families that they're in crisis. So what do you do? What do you do, just like you mentioned before, when there might be one device in the house, 7 people are trying to get on it, the chaos, and also the mental health challenges that have come up now. So we have at our program a family advocate who works with us, who does direct work with the parents. So we find that there's almost this triangle of relationships, as I've heard other folks use this idea of the mentor who's involved, the family, and then the child. And how do you kind of strengthen that triangle and that robust connection between everybody? So the way we've been doing that is by offering our mentoring consistently, being really good listeners. We found that there are things that don't work digitally that work in person. Like the meetings have to be shorter. There's quite an intensity to the meetings that the kids usually have with their mentors. Some of them are fun and lighthearted and school-based, but some of them are like therapy sessions. So when the kid is dialoguing, we're noticing that right around the 30-minute mark, they're squirming out of their chair, and we go, okay, we call it. So we have to be willing to say what worked in person does not necessarily work online. And what I'm proud of in our program is, I would say that the strength of the relationship prior seems to be the saving grace, which is to say that if the children were less connected, if we focus less on that, what are the elements that make that dyad between adult and youth really strong? If we were very, very intentional about that, and I think we're reaping the benefits of it now, because children are sort of going, I'm not feeling well, my house is loud, things are crazy. I can talk to my mentor. And we've really, and that in general, I think, is in place in plenty of programs. They do it well, but having the therapy bend to what we're doing has, I'm going to guess that it's been a big piece in the retention we're seeing even during this crisis. So yeah, the takeaways that I'm seeing are responsiveness, putting listening first to make sure that even sometimes you think you have a great solution for people during this crazy time. And actually, as was already said here, maybe folks aren't resourced enough even in their home to receive that solution. And therefore, what you think is so helpful is actually abrasive, right? So to be able to listen really closely to make sure that what you're offering, even if it's a 30-minute session once a week, that that's possible and feasible and desirable to folks. So yeah, creativity, responsiveness, and a willingness to do whatever it takes.
Thanks so much, Liz. That's awesome. And really appreciate it. And we'll pivot now to Denise. She's batting cleanup or at the end of the row, whichever way you want to say it. But Denise has been doing this for a little while, even though she looks 16 years old. She's been doing it for over 20 years with Big Brothers Big Sisters in Oklahoma and in Texas. She's got, I don't know if got right now or over time, has 3 littles. I know she's got 3 children, so does things in threes. And what I've always loved about Denise is one of those people who I get to meet in the mentoring field who's been doing it for a while, but is always learning and always humble and always collaborative. And those are 3 things that are hard to come by the longer you're in this work and the longer you might think that you've got it figured out and everybody else is just starting. And Denise has never had that attitude at all, and has been a huge ally of ours. Denise, whatever you want to lift up, one of the things that does come to my mind a little bit at the scale and volume that you guys work with volunteers is that bigs are struggling too, I'm guessing, and there's a lot of bigs. And so do your expectations change of them? How much are you dealing with, the crises that they're facing? Does this have you working more directly with littles because the bigs are facing their own stuff? Just kind of whatever you want to lift up. But that was one of the thoughts I had around your program. And then we'll go to the audience for whatever they've got. Thanks, Denise.
Can you hear me? Everybody hear me okay? Thank you, David. Yes, the older I get, the more I realize that I don't know anything at all, right? That's just the way it works. The more you understand the world, the more you learn about anything, the more you realize you don't know very much. Yeah, so I would say that from the very beginning, from week 1, my biggest fear was that the fear and anxiety that I was seeing everywhere, all around, with our staff, with our volunteers, with our partners, there was such a great level of uncertainty that no one knew, what are we supposed to be doing? What are we expected to be doing? And I think from the very beginning, I just kind of latched onto a philosophy of just keeping it as simple as possible, right? You said earlier, I think, David, grace, have some grace for yourself, grace for others. Understand that nobody is dealing with this in the same way. Everybody's going to have to deal with this in a different way, and we don't know what their way is going to be. And so our expectations of ourselves, we just needed to give ourselves a break, have grace. And if we could do that for ourselves, if I'm doing that for my leadership team and my leadership team is doing that for their direct reports, then they're going to do that for their volunteers. And so I think it was Sadiq in the beginning who said he had the 3 C's, I think it was creativity, community, collaboration. I would add connection. And so that's kind of been our pandemic mission, has been to connect bigs with littles, to connect parents to resources, and to connect staff with each other, and not necessarily in any particular order, because connections, that's our mission. That's what relationship development is all about. And so we kind of kept that as a mantra. And in the very beginning, I put the 1 day at a time stone up on the screen because I found those on Amazon. They were like $8, and I sent them to my leadership team members in the mail. I didn't realize that I was doing it anonymously, so it took them like a week or so to figure out that it was from me. But that's just all we can do, is get up in the morning and try to figure out what can we accomplish that day. And so we said, have some guideposts for yourself. Set a goal. Are you going to accomplish one thing a day? Who are you going to be in touch with today? But keeping that pandemic mission in mind, which is do everything you can to connect bigs to littles. In our program, so Big Brothers Big Sisters, we have the community-based program. I was less worried about the connections there, although we did ensure that those were strong. But the workplace littles, who would travel to the workplace to see their bigs, and they didn't necessarily have contact with them outside of that program, we were a little worried about them, which is why we partnered up with the ICouldBe.org to find a resource in order to be able to connect them to each other. I think that would be the other thing that we really did, has been relying on our partners. In the first couple of weeks, the schools were relying on us and many other nonprofit organizations in order to connect with students that weren't responding to any kind of outreach from the schools. And so we needed the schools they needed us and we needed them. They provided digital access, everything from hotspots to Wi-Fi, to the online learning platforms, and also food and all kinds of other assistance. And so we have been leaning very heavily on other nonprofit partners in the community, as well as our schools and our school districts. I think that I can't remember, someone was talking about something along the lines that made me think of, I really truly think that we've been doing some of our best work that we have ever done in this pandemic, because it has forced us to focus on that connection. And sometimes there's so much noise in what happens on any given day in any kind of nonprofit organization. And in this pandemic, we have just really drilled down into the relationships. And we said, that's the most important thing. And really nothing else matters, right? The connections. Being deprived of human physical connections across the globe has made us realize even more how important it is to maintain as much of a connection as we can. And so another thing that we also did, this slide talks about how we have responded. I think it was important to say, what can we do? What should we be doing? And what do we just need to let go of and say, this just isn't going to happen right now? There was a lot of talk about volunteer recruitment is kind of booming. There's a lot of volunteers people are sitting around going, I'm going to look into this, and I haven't had time before, and now I do. But we can't do volunteer interviews right now. We could do them via Zoom, but why should we do that, right? So it was, what do we have time for? What do we have the physical, mental bandwidth for trying to figure out how to do that? What do we have time for? And what are we going to let go of? But I think that across it all, I would say that trying to take care of the staff who take care of the volunteers and the families, who are all helping to take care of the kids, would be what our mantra was. On the previous slide, sorry, if someone could click back, I forgot to mention the Search Institute has been wonderful, absolutely wonderful in terms of the resources that they're putting out there. So if you have not already been exposed to those resources, I highly recommend it. They have a lot of materials on the 40 assets and developmental relationships, and they have been really quick to put things out, responding to mentoring organizations and their needs and the clients and the volunteers. And we also have been doing a video series on our YouTube page. Christina Martinez, who's my VP of External Relations, has been doing an asset every day, putting on her hair and getting in front of the Zoom camera every day to put those out. And we're going to go through all 40, and hopefully that'll be helpful for volunteers and parents out there.
I like it, Denise. I like putting on her hair. That's a new one for me. For a guy who has very little. But I think, Denise, thank you so much. I especially, before I turn it to Dudney, I think one of the things you spoke about, which is, one of the hardest things in the world, and I just appreciate you giving us a real life example, is the opportunities that come up in this moment that you don't take. It's really easy to talk heroically about everything you do because it's this moment and blah, blah, blah. But the idea, and lots of agencies are bragging about, we're still onboarding people and training people and recruiting people. And that's great. That's a choice they've made. Like, nothing wrong with that. Help people act on their intentions. But just the fact that you said, like, it's enough for us to shore up the connections we have. We're just not going to virtually onboard no matter how much excitement there is. I'm sure you're finding other ways to take people's interests and circle back to them. but that's a really hard choice. And I just appreciate you lifting it up as a choice you made in the face of opportunity in order to keep yourselves whole and focus on the existing, relationships that you have. That's a hard choice. You didn't make it real dramatic, but I know it. I'm sure it is. So I'm gonna turn it over. As we all know in this profession, nothing good is done by yourself. And Dudney Silla on a daily basis makes all of us at Mentor look better than we are. So I'm going to turn it over to Dudney, our program director, who has been sort of monitoring the chat to lift up any insights or questions and direct them to the panelists with the half an hour that we have left. I want to be clear.
Yeah, so I'll hop in briefly here. Thank you all so much for your participation and to all the presenters for sharing your knowledge and creating the space. We saw a lot of things get reaffirmed in the chat box here. The importance of mental health, is a theme, and how us prioritizing that, you all speaking to that is really, really important. Tony shared that every morning he meets with his staff for 5 minutes of meditation and reflecting on what the day holds and seeing how powerful that is for his staff. So thank you, Tony, for sharing that. And also this message around how we as leaders can think about how we go back into the world after all of this. We can't go back to normal. All the inequities are showing very predominantly, and what are some ways we can think about culture change in order to address those inequities. So if anyone also wants to touch more on that, that came up in the chat a lot as well. One particular question related to families that I wanted to toss to the audience was, during your presentation, Liz, you talked about being able to get feedback from families and that your program really took initiative to center families of mentees. The question that we have here from the audience is, were they responsive to the outreach? And was getting in touch with guardians a struggle or a barrier at all? We know how important it is to have community, to be collaborating with communities, and there was some curiosity around how you were able to do that.
Sure, yeah, thanks. I'm happy to answer. We've had stages of engagement with our parents, and this particular crisis came at a stage of high engagement. So I want to highlight that at first, because it is a challenge to get high buy-in engagement. At the Arthur Project, one way that we select and work with mentees, we flag them for chronic absenteeism, right? So there's that sense of not engaging, but their parents actually have to sign the permission slip. So I want to note that we all know what it is. That I want to note that sometimes people self-select, and so there's that bias inside of it for parents who are already likely to want to flag that. But the parents who have signed that permission slip, who are really well aware, we have been working with them for 2 years prior to this year, kind of wondering about how to get parent engagement overall. And then we were very lucky to get a grant that allowed us to hire a dedicated family advocate whose entire job is really bringing in parents who are looking at the goals. We're very goal oriented at the Arthur Project. Here's your child embarking on their goals. Would you have some goals you'd like to just talk through with our family advocate? We can make referrals, right? So we had that prior relationship in place. And so when this, and you often will, Anastasia is our family coordinator. She's amazing, a family advocate. So what will happen is you'll come in and you'll see Anastasia is already talking with the families and working out some issues. So there was an organic kind of transfer from that dynamic that we had. And then I think that we've built some trust based on that for a while. So when this came up with that prior trust, well, we were able to get a return on that, and people said, okay. I think also the experience that, as far as I'm understanding, is that people are not, it's unusual to be asked questions in such a, usually the contact from the school, we're school-based, is punitive in some way, or the phone rings from the school and it's kind of bad news all around. They already know that when the Arthur Project calls, we have worked with our staff in such a way where our culture is that if the phone rings from the Arthur Project, like, it's good news all around with your kid. And there may be challenges we're going to talk through, but it is like high energy, happy, and joyful. So I think culturally we did that, and structurally we had the family advocate in place. And then the questions that we chose were chosen without being too they had that nice balance between asking how we can help, but also not being invasive. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then the word of mouth, spread among the cohort, and then the parents were responsive. So I hope that's helpful. And I want to flag some ways that that's entirely specific to us, but hopefully parts you can generalize.
Yeah.
Cool.
Would anyone else like to share on that? Maybe Terry or Denise? There's a question or two here for Harry, so I'll go to you next.
Well, I'll just add to what Liz was saying. We, have been primarily focused on the child throughout our program. And about a year and a half ago, we started piloting a 2-gen model where we were both serving youth who aged out of foster care and were now parents. So we were serving their 4 to 6-year-old children and then the parents in New York and LA. As a prevention strategy for child welfare and improved outcomes. And what we learned during this pandemic was our relationship in those chapters where we had a pilot was so much stronger because we were providing so much support to the caregivers that now really across our network, that's what everyone has had to do. And it's everything from providing food and in some cases, outright money to families to loaning devices, that it's made change management much easier as a result of this pandemic. And that's one opportunity I see that has come out of the pandemic, is building stronger relationships with our families, and we plan to continue that beyond the pandemic.
I'm muted. Can y'all hear me? Sorry.
Yep, we can hear you.
There's a delay in my buttons. So I would say that a lot of people know what the Big Brother, Big Sister model is. And I would say that over the last couple of years, we have been shifting towards a lot more support of volunteers than parents. I've been with this organization for 20 years, and for the first 15 years, the case management model that I was trained as a case manager and was very heavy on providing support to parents. So that's something I think that our organization has always been very invested in. But other than doing pre-match training for volunteers, we hadn't really been doing a lot to help volunteers be able to advocate for families and be able to help them navigate something like this pandemic. And I really think that because of we now have not to go into a lot of details about it, but we have like a 5-module volunteer training curriculum that volunteers are going through, that they're learning a lot more than they ever could. Even if you had made pre-match training 5 hours long, your brain can only take so much at any one period of time. Volunteers now are in a stronger position to be able to help these families. And I have always said, we can reach out to the families. We have a staff probably of 32 who have direct contact with families. 32 staff are never going to be able to do everything that needs to get done for 1,800 children, right? And so, but we have a corresponding 1,800 volunteers. And so anything that we can do to strengthen those volunteers so that they can help these families navigate these challenges, they are a lot of times a lot closer to the families than we are as a staff. And so that's kind of how we handle that.
If I can just jump in, may I jump in? That's interesting, Denise. It makes me think of during the 2008 financial crisis, I was working at iMentor, and one of the hats I wore was mentor recruitment and management. And we had a lot of our mentors they were people that worked in the financial industry at the time. And I just saw, Lehman shut down, and then this bank shut down. And then I just could see in my mind, I just saw like mentors leaving the building, and what were we going to do? Now we were going to have 200 kids without mentors, and my phone rang off the hook that day from mentors who were packing up their offices because they lost their jobs. And they made a time to call me in tears, saying, please tell me I still get to mentor my mentee.
Wow.
And I thought that was amazing. And so later I did some investigating, like, what was that? What was going on internally for people that made them call me at like a really scary time for some people? And what I learned was that prior to the crisis, a lot of our volunteers who are working in the financial industry volunteered because they felt like it was the company thing to do. You know, if I work for Goldman Sachs, Goldman people volunteer. Okay, that was kind of like the sentiment. Something to put on your resume, something to make you look good, something to say I'm part of the team. When the crisis hit and they were no longer part of the team, they were volunteering to say, please tell me I'm something more than just my job. And I keep thinking about that, and I think about how there's so many people in this country right now, all over the world right now, in this country in particular, that are out of work, and that, you know, who are starting to lose, will start to lose a sense of purpose. And I do think that there is, you know, and I know this is a lot. It's a lot to ask of the community, but I do think that there's a way that we can all heal together when we invite some of those people while they're trying to figure out what's next for them and how to stay financially afloat to help out. And we know that when people help out, as you know, it helps to, at the very least, decrease our personal stress. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to toss it to Harry here, because we had some questions related to your work around Nomium and virtual gaming and debating. And the question is essentially if you could expand a little bit about how you went about creating those things, or these things that other folks can also access if they're looking for ways to engage youth of different ages, 16 to 24, as well as younger. So if you could talk a little bit more about that approach around creativity and interacting with mentors and mentees.
Yeah, so I'd start off by just saying, well, first, you know, we always at Brothers at Bar, we always are trying to feed the want and then put the need in, and that was just like from day one. There's a when we're doing sessions with our mentors, we kind of explain to them, you know, you think of an example of like food stamps, right? You know, a lot of people, you know, ended up taking those things and selling them for to have dollars, you know, so that they could go out and spend it the way that they want to, right? And you have to feed that want and then to serve the need. So one, you know, we went and asked our mentees and our mentors, you know, what do they want during this period of time? And that's what came up, you know, just like I said, we asked them and they said, you need time to have fun and excitement. And specifics around how we went about doing that. You know, one is just, you know, with the debates and things like that, it's really just being able to tap into the toolkit that I put into on there already. Just how do you use our virtual platform, but then put this canvas underneath it to make it not feel virtual. And there are a bunch of tools that you can put underneath your Zoom sessions that allow you, you know, that go beyond just raising hand and polling, that allow you to really create a seamless debate. You know, one of the hardest things that we had to figure out at first is how do you have people talk, you know what I mean, at the same time on these sessions. So one, I just recommend definitely tapping into that resource, the Radically Remote Toolkit. Beyond that, on the video games, I'm going to be 100% honest. You know, that's really where we lean into our mentors the most, because I'm not one for video games, so I can't tell you how we set up those things. But you know, our mentors came to our weekly meetings, our college guys, and they said, look, we want to set up these gaming rooms for our guys, so no one else can come in, and just our mentees come in and we can play with them. So I got to get back to you on that one. I could shoot an email over to everyone, and then we can blast that out for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's great. And one theme that came on that anyone on the panel can certainly chime in on this is we got a couple of questions, one related to mentors and one related to supporting staff in terms of, you know, obviously by going virtual, we're now entering into folks' homes, and there are a lot of parents who are navigating home care and child care with trying to be engaged. And so some of our questions on here are, what are some resources that you provide specifically to mentors who are sort of, and you touched on this a little bit, who are trying to stay connected while navigating things at home? And also, how do you support your staff members as well, who also are dealing with things in their community and in their families while also trying to be engaged as staff members.
Can I make a comment on culture? Maybe someone else can speak to structure.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that, so also some of this is from my experience at the Arthur Project, and some of this is my experience just being in a very vulnerable part of our society and kind of coming to another side of it and seeing across. I think that what can happen sometimes is just the sense of, you have a Zoom call, you have a professional obligation, but there's a crisis, right? And you have that struggle, and how much of it do you have to tuck away? And obviously you want to put yourself together and be professional, but at the same time, there's a pandemic and a crisis. So I wanted to give a nod to David, how you organized this call. There was a mention, hey, we understand there's chaos sometimes in the background, and it's a crazy time for all of us. And if folks need to step away to hush, help the child and come back, to set a tone and a culture of understanding and flexibility is to say, like, to acknowledge it, what is going on. And while we do want to hold a professional space and we have these needs to be met, please know that we see you and we understand. Sometimes to put that out there and to model it as a leader as well is to give people permission to even take that 2 minutes at the beginning of the call to catch up and say, it's been tough, you know what, in these 3 ways, and to not make it too big, but to make it right size. I think that as organizational leaders, there's a responsibility to set that permission and to the appropriate size of that permission with it. And it can go a long way to making people feel like it's not just me, right? That I'm having a hard time, but I can still come to work and thank you for the space, right? So I think culturally that's an important tone for leaders to set right now.
Yeah.
I think the one other thing that I've seen with our people is also just giving them, like, everybody's trying to be such sort of like multitasking jujitsu. And so, I mean, I know especially stereotypically for women and sort of like the lean in vernacular, this has always been a pressure, maybe a little less for the weaker male counterparts. But the sort of notion that everything is happening at the same time. And so this is just how I live. And there's a liberation you can create where it's like, you don't need to, I know you need to live like that some of the day, like there's no getting around it, but like, what's the purpose of this right now? You don't need to be on this meeting. Go be with your job. Like you have the power to sort of release people from trying to do everything simultaneously. But I think their instinct is not to, because their normal right now is that everything is blended. So the sort of highest expectations, highest performer people are trying to do everything all at once. And it's impossible, and you need to break that rhythm for them because they can't break it for themselves almost, is something I've just noticed in managing folks.
Yeah. I'd like to add that, we're all helpers, right? So there's a problem and we fix it, and hopefully we fix it in a way that it's not, we're not superheroes coming in, we're human beings alongside other human beings trying to solve the problem. But regardless, we are helpers. And so, and right now there's a lot of, like, the burden is on our mentors, it's on our staff, it's on ourselves to help everyone else feel calm and get through this the best way that they can. And so I think, as an organization, you want to think about ways that you can unscrew that pressure valve a little bit for your team. I think about mentors in your programs, if in I was about to say in real life, no, this is real life, pre-pandemic, did your mentors get to hang out with each other? Did they have networking events? Did they have like social events? Maybe it's group mentoring, so they got to see their mentor peers. Well, they've lost that right now. So how can you rebuild that digitally, but you kind of maybe using some of the creativity that Brothers At has used for how to help kids have fun together. And I think you can do the same thing for your staff. I belong to this international education community, and we're all spread out all over the world. And normally when we get online, we're getting online to solve some education problem. And when the first big wave hit of the first big corona wave hit, we had scheduled a call for all of us to get together. And by the time we got on the phone, we were just so exhausted. And really what we needed was this release. And we happened to have a music educator on the call. And she said, what if we just threw out our entire agenda today? And what if could I lead you in some music, some uplifting music? And so she taught us like a spiritual song, and I mean, it's a secular group, but it was like a really inspiring song. And she taught us it, and we all sang, and it was all completely off because we're on Zoom and like there's the delay, which just made us laugh, but it was really beautiful. And then we ended up having a little dance party for like 10 minutes, and it is exactly what we needed. And it replenished us to go back to the work. So I don't know, that it makes me think about like what can we recreate? Think about what we lost, what can we recreate digitally?
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on that. What could we recreate? I talked about the book club that we started for our younger guys, and I think it's just the clearest example is if we can get guys under the age of 21 just sitting, there's so much time on our hands right now to sit down and read. That's really been the biggest thing. We've actually created a Slack channel for our mentors only, so that we're reading the same book and can communicate in real time about our thoughts about the book and things like that. It's really kept guys super engaged. And it's been a great thing. Somebody needs to like create some type of book club app or something like that to be 100% honest.
That's awesome.
One of our favorite, the favorite staff meeting that we've had during this pandemic, and we're having weekly ones, was actually a tour of a llama farm. Our COO was able to get in touch with someone who navigated and gave us like a 15-minute tour of farm animals, llamas, the baby goats, and things like that to kick off our meeting. And it was to celebrate somebody's birthday, but everyone was like, that's the best staff meeting we've ever had.
I need to know where you got that from. We could do that. We do a Zoom social hour every Friday at 3:30, and our games sound a lot more boring in comparison to that.
It's phenomenal. Well, thank you all so much. I'm gonna toss it to David here to kind of bring us into a close. But first, I wanted to maybe pull Sadiq into this one last question, which was a question related to or anyone on the panel, are there any resources for mentors to connect? If you're a mentor, you want to talk or engage with other mentors, are there any ways to create opportunities for connection and communication between mentors to sort of share tips on how to continue to show up for young people and support each other? So I'm curious, in your organizations or in your communities, how you've seen some of those connections play out.
Sadiq, are you still with us? And have you seen that in Maryland?
Hey, my video went out a little while ago, but I think this is where we can kind of circle back to the creativity. I mean, I love. I mean, this has been such an amazing conversation that I can't wait to go back to Harry's point, and Ellen. I think all of you have shared some awesome tools that we'll take back and share around Maryland for sure, because that's how this works, right? It's not R&D, research and development. It's rip off and duplicate, baby. And that's how we roll. But no, I would just say that because there's far less restrictions, we've definitely seen the virtual happy hour thing. We've seen the virtual sort of birthday parties. We've actually, we're in the process of scheduling in Maryland a virtual ED executive director hangout for just program leaders to just talk shop, much in the exact same way that this has provided a forum to do so. So I think this is where you can get creative. We've also seen some private Facebook groups from some of our programs as well, where they've kind of done some Facebook lives inside those private groups, Instagram lives. So yeah, we've seen a bunch of those different pieces. But again, let's just get creative, have some fun, and the only thing that beats a fella is a try, right?
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't do, nationwide virtual we call them BIGS roundtables, and any volunteer can get onto the call and talk to other volunteers about whatever challenges you're facing. I mean, I love that idea. It doesn't have to be local. It can be national.
Only there were a national group for mentoring in America. Maybe they would pick that up. I feel like that might be a cue to me, Denise. So What I would say is like a couple things. One, that is one of the great values of, our local affiliates is they can do that across programs, and then we can also do it nationally. I also think even in the absence of Mentor having an affiliate in your community, you could create like a brother or sister relationship with another program. But there is something about breaking out of your own program and having mentors across programs talking about their common experience right now. So there's a lot of ways to cut that. And if you haven't seen, there's a pretty awesome message from Kemba Walker from the NBA that he created for us with the NBA. That's sort of a message to mentors. He's a mentor with Big Brothers Big Sisters in Charlotte. He's sort of more of a grand mentor. He's kind of a mentor to a bunch of bigs and littles. But he gave a great message about encouraging connection. So it's worth sending out. It's on our website if you haven't already seen it. But Dudney, I just appreciate you facilitating all that and raising up 142 people's voices and insights and questions. And I'm sure there are more to come. I would just kind of say a couple things. One, just like Denise just did, I hope all of you will continue to give us, ideas, things we can be responsive to. Mentor has always tried to say that we are a servant leader and a platform and a community. We are not running this community. We are only as good as the people who contribute to it. We do send out things like the survey we have going on right now, which is the second survey we've sent out, because it's the only way we can aggregate data. Otherwise, we're only listening to the voices closest to us and the people we're friends with, and that's not the right way for us to get information. So, I mean, it's a good way, but it's not the best way. The survey allows us to get, to Harry's point, as proximate as possible to Main Street where the mentoring is being run and happening. So please fill out the survey we have out. That's my public service announcement. And please just keep talking to us about what you're seeing and what you're hearing and how we can be most responsive. I would, also say that I think much of what we experience and have been championing is being both commercialized and revealed. I don't know what that means in the moment after this moment, but if, my son jokes all the time about if he has to watch another commercial that says, now more than ever, we have to connect, and then it tells you to buy a Subaru, he might get sick watching TV. But there is, connection has been commercialized. That is not necessarily a bad thing. It might make us a little queasy, but it's not necessarily a bad thing in terms of people understanding the power of connection. And so we all have the charge to do something with that in our communities. And I think the idea of being isolated, the idea of being at home, I've heard a lot of people say to me, like, my community was already facing a pandemic. And so the idea of the way in which people experience, to Liz's great way she phrased it, about being on different sides of this sort of life in terms of vulnerability. Some folks may think they understand it right now. I'm not sure they do, but they may think they understand it, and that's helpful. That is helpful in terms of empathy and action and will. I think our educators who are doing heroic work are also understanding in terms of the power of relationship and the idea of what they knew about young people's homes and young people's total self and total condition. It's hard to educate in this time if you didn't know that already. And so I think our educators are going to be coming back to a reality where they're going to be drawing on us a lot harder. I hope. I think it's an opening for us to say, like, if you want to understand young people's full context, the partnership of mentoring organizations and people who are experts in relationship is going to be of great value to you, because now you've been inside all their homes, or you couldn't find them when you needed to be. And we could, because we know them and we know their context and we know their families. And so I think for all these reasons, there is an awakening, and there is also a struggle. Struggle to keep the lights on, the struggle to stay whole, the struggle to stay relevant. All of those things are very real too. There is nothing to me more endemic of the human condition, which is holding two oppositional things in your head at the same time. And that is what we're living with right now, what we're always living with, what we live with as a movement. It's something triumphant, and it's also a struggle, and nothing that's triumphant doesn't have a struggle in it. So I am appreciative of the power, the resilience, the beauty, the diversity, the justice that comes with this movement. And I am unbelievably humbled by the struggle that it is as well. And maybe to steal that commercial now more than ever. But we will continue to draw on all that holds us dear. And the only thing that makes a struggle the most righteous, I would say, in the end, is to do it alongside somebody else. So we feel really lucky to do it alongside all of you. And we feel lucky that you make that real for young people to do it alongside somebody else. I will turn it to Dudney if he's got any kind of good and welfare, and I will thank the panelists for all of your time and wisdom and giving it all to us in the preparation for today. Dudney, take us home, brother.
Appreciate it. Thank you all so much for joining us, the panelists and all the guests. Just a couple of things we wanted to share with folks in terms of some next steps and resources. We have a webinar coming up next week. We have a couple of slides that we'll share with everybody after the call around our coronavirus webpage, our mentor, the virtual mentoring portals that we've collaborated to launch to support programs. We're working with young people 12 and under and 13 and up. And next week, we're going to continue this webinar series with our third conversation, really focusing in on health, holistic health, mental health, how programs are providing all kinds of instrumental aids to programs locally and to families locally. So we're going to have a great conversation on that topic next week. So please join us. And like David said, fill out this survey. We have a survey open through the end of day Friday to collect more feedback and thoughts on your challenges so we can collaborate with our affiliate network to provide responses and answers as best we can throughout the country. Find our latest resources on our webpage. We'll share the resources that came up in today's call from our great panelists and all of their slides. Email us if you have any additional questions. You can apply for technical assistance through our collaboration with the National Mentoring Resource Center and OJJDP, and also follow us on at Mentor National. We'll be posting resources on that page as well. So thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, David, for leading the way. And thank you to the audience for your engagement and your leadership. And shout out to all the parents and families and young people who are providing leadership and living through this moment. We're all in it together, and we appreciate your time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.